right. We have a hello, Dermot. We have a rule here. Elizabeth and I have had this rule now for at least the last year. It's called the Regis rule. You're familiar with
Yes.
Regis Philbin?
No.
Yeah,
Oh,
Regis Philbin. What was his most famous show? Who Wants to Be a
so
Millionaire?
I guess it was the morning show that he did, Regis
Right,
and Kathy
Regis and Kathy.
Lee.
Right.
Yeah. So
Oh, yes, I do know that.
yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So the Regis rule is that I'll let David G tell. Go ahead.
Well, it's Elizabeth's story actually, but but apparently when she was on TV, going to be on that show, um, they were like, she said, does someone want to come and interview me? Pre-interview before the show, and the person said, "Oh no, Regis has no conversation prior to the downbeat, so that way, if things pop up, we're not saying them again." So they sound inauthentic. So it's always so Elizabeth and I, that's why even if we drive to the studio in the same car, we're only talking about the coffee that we're drinking, or we're talking about the road that we're driving on. We don't talk about any content because we don't want to like have the mic drop line and then suddenly we're like, oh, let's make believe we never had that conversation before. So we call it the Regis rule. And Regis, of course, Regis Philbin, you know, one of the great, well, he was born, I think, in New York, but he is one of the great Irish, um, I don't know, whatever you want to call him. He is buried at Notre Dame University,
Mm,
fighting Irish. Um,
yeah. Well, you'd never professionally worked in commercial radio because the two greatest words that you live by are planned spontaneity. So, yeah, it sounds fresh, but it ain't. And then you say
Right.
this, and then I'll say that, and then you do
right.
this, and then we'll finish on that. But don't.
And then, and like, wait, I'm having a spontaneous thought. It's that,
Yeah. What was I meant to be spontaneous about again? Oh yeah. So yeah, I get it. But I guess we used to call it the roadmap in radio. That we'd have a loose roadmap. We'd have an idea of our direction, but we
yeah,
didn't want to share all the goodies before
yeah.
the trip.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
our philosophy for our podcast, I think it was born out of that's just what happened, not out of any deep strategic thinking.
Yeah.
But we figured someone just shows up and says, "All right, what do you want to talk about?" And then the other person just springs it on the other
Hmm.
person. So the other person has no clue. We could be talking about, death or astrology or like it doesn't matter. And then that person is spontaneous because they never knew what the theme or topic was. So that's sort of kinda the format
Mm.
um, for
Yeah, but that speaks to how confident and knowledgeable you both are and comfortable in your own skin, in that you're like, we can do that, that because any other way would seem a bit weird. And that shows what a good match you are as well. Because if one of you was a hyper prep list merchant and the other was easy
Yeah.
peasy, then, there might be a little bit of a clash there. But yeah, I think it just there aren't many people who work that way because they usually don't have the knowledge and confidence to back it up. So
Mm. Hmm.
that's a
being
lovely
that
thing.
way. Stop,
Very kind.
stop pouring all these accolades on us.
I would imagine though, when you're on stage, that there's so much of that, right? For you? I
Wait,
mean,
stop. So let's start because this is really important and powerful
okay, okay,
content.
okay, okay, okay,
All right.
okay.
Um, and this is our final episode, if you can even believe it, of season 3. And as you know, we don't have guests on the Shadow and the Light podcast. We flow spontaneously in every episode, but we have broken that rule on our final episode of each season. And in the first season, we had Jamar Rogers, the amazing meditator, musician who intros and outros the podcast. At the end of season 2, we had Laura Wright, who's 30 plus years of daytime TV. And of course, she's also a certified Masters of Wisdom and Meditation teacher. So that was just great. And Elizabeth, you and I spent some time in Dublin earlier in the year at our teachers retreat, and we had the opportunity for both of us to hang out with one of my favorite people, also, of course, a certified Masters of Wisdom and Meditation teacher. But I think really during our journey, you also got to hang out with Dermot and fall in love with him. So please welcome our amazing guest for the final episode of season 3, the incomparable, just incomparable Dermot Whelan.
Welcome. Yay.
Oh my
We are
God.
here.
What an honor. Thank you. Thank you so much, guys. It is
Oh my
just
gosh.
a
Thank you.
real honor to be here, to be closing out another incredible season of The Shadow and the Light, and just to see you guys as well on my computer here from across the Atlantic, and lovely to say hi to all your fabulous listeners.
Oh my.
Thank you.
Dermot, you are an inspiration to us, and you have been an inspiration to me. I've had the opportunity to hang out in studio with you, with Dave Moore and you during the Dermot and Dave show a couple of times, actually. And I've gotten an opportunity to walk around Dublin with you. You pointed to me. This is that first comedy club that I ever stood up in, and you pointed up to the window. But you are an author. You are, I don't know how you even feel about the word comedian, but you are certainly one of the most enlightened beings on the planet. And why would I say that? Because in our definition of enlightenment, enlightenment is being able to hold polar opposites simultaneously. That's what the ancient wisdom teachings tell us. If I can hold the shadow and the light simultaneously, that's enlightenment. And your brain, however your mom and God created that brain, that magnificent brain of yours, that's the secret of comedy, in my opinion. That's that's irony, that's paradox. That's like, what? That's not what I was expecting. I was expecting that conditioned thing, and boom, Dermot just drops the line and just rips our hearts open, and that's creates belly laughs and deeper insight as well. And so you are a master of that. It was Siobhan McKenna, not the actress Siobhan McKenna, but the author and meditation teacher Siobhan McKenna, who lives down the lane from you, who introduced us, and she just opened my life to really all things Ireland, and took me to all these amazing places, and even hooked me up with Bressie. I was on Bressie's podcast a couple of years ago talking about mental health and stuff like that. And so truly one of my deepest and most beautiful connections in my life is my connection with you. And so I'm so grateful that you said yes. And here you are. Here you are. And I'm so glad that Elizabeth got the opportunity to really spend time with you and see us, in our weird little interplay that we had at the Sugar Club for a couple of nights. And Elizabeth,
Well,
I know.
your American viewers and listeners may not be fully aware that you and I shared a stage on 2 nights in a row in Dublin, and we had such a great time. And I tell you what, I've been working as a comedian for the last 20 years, and I was put to shame by you, who just rocks up onto the stage and firing out zingers every 2 seconds. And Elizabeth knows exactly what I'm talking about. But humor obviously is such a huge part of my life, and that's what I do now. Is I try and blend humor and comedy and meditation teachings to help people to de-stress and feel less busy and overwhelmed in their lives. But it was the humor that I heard when I was busy and wrecked, which is the name of my current live show and my new book. But when I was feeling busy and overwhelmed, I was in a teeny tiny cottage about 3 hours from Dublin. And it was the first time I'd ever gone away on a retreat, and it felt weird to me, and the space felt weird. And I kept asking myself, what am I doing this for? And I should be back in the thick of things. And I remember lying there in bed, just kind of, I'd gone to bed early because there was nothing else to do because I was in the middle of nowhere. And I turned on an internet radio station called Hay House Radio, and I heard this voice, and it was David G. And you were talking about some deep stuff, but you were doing it with humor. You were making me laugh. And it was such a moment for me because I was like, oh my God, what he's saying is totally resonating with me, but it's the way he's saying it as well. He's infusing it with humor and lightness. And that really set me on a huge, a really important trajectory years before I knew I was going to end up doing what I'm doing now. But that seed was planted. And it's one of the things which I love, Elizabeth, about your relationship with David G on your podcast is that you get those lovely little insights, but delivered with humor and lightness, and that lovely relationship between the two of you. So I think that's why I and everybody else love your podcast.
Thank you. I think you bring such a gift to the world with laughter, and being that I'm working with people all day in mental health and a lot of heartbreak, and I totally know what you're talking about. But one of the things I love about the teacher training that you did, we both did, is that David G's going so deep into the wisdom, but then you're also falling on the floor laughing. And that's something that when I saw you live and I've listened to your podcast, what that does, what that brings is that laughter for me, I'll just speak for myself, is it opens our heart. We feel maybe a little less alone in the heartbreak and the pain that maybe we're talking about, but then we can laugh about it in a way, and that humanizes our experience. So many of us are trying to uphold some persona in our lives, and that makes us feel more alone. But this element of humor, this element of comedy that is real. I mean, I'd love to hear what you would say you feel that it is touching in on, but to me, it's the heart. There's like people don't even know if people realize it, right? Like there's this vulnerability, there's this window that opens up, and then to be able to add in this breath and meditation, there's a major expansion that can occur in that.
Yeah, you said that so well. I think, a key word is resistance. And, we all resist when we feel something we don't want to feel, or we're experiencing something we don't want to feel. We push back a little bit. And the stage is a great place to see that resistance in action, because you get this bird's eye view of the audience, a bunch of strangers, who are we're all together for one night. And I'm sure you see it in your own clients and your own students as well, David G. But when I'm standing on a stage, I'm looking at the audience, particularly with men, you can see that resistance. A lot of them wouldn't be used to being in an environment, where meditation is on the table. I've been to enough spiritual weekends to know that it's usually me and one other guy. And we're sort of giving each other that, that knowing look that we were, both found ourselves here, and we'll make the most of it. But
Right.
I think you can literally see resistance in people's bodies in the audience. And when you open them up with laughter, they literally open their bodies. You can see their physical being start to open up and relax. And you have to imagine that there's something inside them as well, then starting to open. And that's all you need. Then you can start dropping in the ideas and the insights. But, it's about just working with that resistance, and humor is a beautiful way to do that. And as I said, men are a little bit more resistant to this stuff, because I think just wellness, spirituality, meditation, mindfulness, that kind of stuff has been marketed with quite a female slant, I think, for many years, and I think that's because women are generally more open to it. So I think as men, we have got to work a little bit harder to find our way into this world. And but as well, we tend to be slower to drift into this place or to ask for help or to try out new stuff. I always think that if a woman goes to the doctor and the doctor says, "So how long have you been feeling this?" And woman will go, "A while." "How long is a while?" "Oh, maybe a week or 10 days." Okay. When the man goes to the doctor, he says, "A while." "How long is a while?" Since I was 11." So
Right.
we will carry this stuff around and literally wait till the limbs are falling off before we actually put ourselves into a position where we're going, okay, I'm a bit vulnerable here. I think I might have to ask for help. So, a long way of answering your question. Yeah, I really do think humor is a beautiful, just a lubricant for
Mm.
uh, for easing people into places where maybe they wouldn't have naturally gravitated to.
Yeah, and it
Mhm.
doesn't help that in spiritual circles, they're like, "Oh, you're getting deeper into the stillness and silence that rests within to access your divine feminine." And like you tell that to most guys, and they're like, wait, time out here. What, divine what?" And so, but that's really what I see. There's masculine energy, which is do, out of my way, um, kind of energy. Follow through, get it done, lock it down, check those boxes, on to the next thing. And then there's feminine energy, which is more nourishing, nurturing, space holding, openness. Let me hold this moment, or let me hold you. And again, back to that, interesting dynamic between polar opposites. Obviously, we're most balanced when we have both of those energies going on, where I can be stable and still have a vision and move towards, the fulfillment of that uh, vision. But
Mm.
yeah, you're right. I think, for I've been teaching for a bunch of years, and it has historically and consistently been like 85% um, women. And so whenever
Mm.
I suddenly do stumble into any member of that 15%, I'm like, wait, stay here with me. Don't go. This is amazing. Magic is happening here. Because someone has to really step out. And that's what I really loved about your first book. I know you wrote a book, a children's book. What was that? Nani and the Chocolate Factory, or Willy Wonka?
No,
Dermot.
Noni and the Great Chocolate Mystery. It was based on a radio
Right,
character I
right.
had about an old lady who sold what she called chocolate out of a pram. So yeah, that was that had nothing to do with mindfulness. It was just a crazy caper.
Yeah, well, it's great. My mother-in-law's name, her whole life, her name's Naomi, but everyone always called her Noni. So,
Ah, no way.
so it's so perfect. Whenever I see you uh, dressed up in your little cape and your shawl or whatever, over your head, it's like, oh yeah, it's reminding me of my mother-in-law. It's so perfect.
Yeah,
So
but
great.
I think, I'm sure you've come across this as well, both of you, and with all the wonderful people that you work with. I had an example of it with my brother. It's the idea that meditation, mindfulness, anything in that space is going to make you soft. Um, and
Mm.
my brother was quite resistant to it, and he was like, "No, that's going to take my edge." Like he's a go-getting business guy, always ran companies and made quick decisions and go 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 and close that deal and all that kind of stuff. Um, and I, I think there's a perception for a lot of people, male or female, that maybe if you delve too much into this stuff, that you'll go soft and suddenly you won't care as much about your career or reaching goals or closing that deal, or you might miss something because you're so chill, that you don't react as quick in a moment, whether it be business or sport or whatever it is. Um, and of course, we know that that's not true. It's a lot of it is so much of it is actually getting the clutter out of the way so that our great selves can be even greater. And
Yeah.
certainly that's what I've found. But I think that is a perception that is still out there, particularly amongst men, in that this stuff is a bit fluffy, and that if you engage with it too much, that either A, people won't take you as seriously in your working or, you know, whatever environment you like to thrive in, um, or that it will in some way make you soft or cloudy, or you'll lose that edge that you've been relying on, you know.
Right.
And
It's such a misinterpretation
yeah.
by the planet in general. And you know, I do a lot of work with. I've worked with Dutch special forces and with NATO and with you know, different police departments throughout the United States. And I even got to work with the Dublin gang unit of the Guard. And you know, it's the first question. Everyone, is that going to make me slower on the draw? Is that going to make me miss something critical? Is that going to make me, you know, suddenly, you know, get killed or, you know, in that environment? And it's like,
Not
no.
something to worry Irish police get quicker on the draw because they don't have guns. How quickly can they get their pencil to their notebook? They write
Right,
down all the bad things you've done.
right. But, you know, again, it's part of that whole masculine persona. You know, when we see, you know, cops or the guard or or members of the military, it's that, you know, that masculine, you know, I'm even making a deeper voice as I even talk
Yeah.
about it. It's the
Hoorah!
masculine, it's the men, it's the manly men. Um, and no, it's your divine masculine energy, obviously. But it's such a powerful teaching that you say, even the concept of, you know, your first book on these teachings, mindful. We've always like, wait, if my mind's full, isn't that the thing I don't want to have? Don't I want the mind less? And you know, but it doesn't sound, you know, I think there's like the Jason Bateman podcast, The Smart Less. You know,
Yeah.
isn't the mind less where we really want to be? And it's like awesome and awful. I don't want some awe. I want full on awe. I want awful.
Yeah.
Uh, I want I want mind less and awful. So that'll be my next book, Mindless and Awful.
Right. Hilarious.
But I found it so spectacular, even like the cover of your book, Mindful, with all that stuff going on inside. And here we are, you know, it's the age of mindfulness, and yet, what does it really mean? And again, that's speaks to your brilliance, being able to take these polar opposites and the what doesn't that mean that, or doesn't that mean that? Um, but Dermot, just you've probably given the same answers to this question 1,000 times, but humor our audience here just for a moment.
I have
So
a
you're
massive
hanging out.
ego.
You're
I'm
right.
happy to talk about myself all day. But I keep writing books, just
Enough
trawling
about
through my
me.
life for anecdotes.
Enough about me. What do you think about me? Um, So, so there had to be a moment in time where you're like, you know, hanging out, you know, just a kid, and suddenly you're like, give me the mic. I have something to say, and um, you know, and it might garner me some positive attention if I make it funny or something along those lines. So, what was that spark inside of you that suddenly inspired you, or even led you in the direction of uh, comedy in some way, being the funny guy in the room? Because I also went through that same journey, and mine was because I had such low self-esteem and was always being ignored, and no one was ever listening to me, and I was always told to go to my room. But I knew that if I could come up and do like a 5-minute stand-up routine, even for my parents or their friends, that people would say, "Oh, you're not worthless. You're not a worthless piece of boop." Um, so for you, what was that? What was that journey?
There was definitely a beginning to my role as a performer, and I think that was Catholic Mass, church, because I grew up in a
Mm,
very small country neighborhood. There were no exciting theaters or any place with a stage. The only place with a stage really was Mass. So when you're sitting
mm,
in the congregation and you see altar boys and girls sitting there, um, you know, in front of everybody with jobs to do and, their own wardrobe department. I thought, I think I'd like to get up there and see what the audience looks like from that perspective, and be in everyone's gaze, So I think like a lot of comedians started off as altar boys because it was the only stage in town. Um, and you got to ring a bell and walk around and, as I say, yeah, change into exciting clothes and things. So I think it started there, but I think the humor side of stuff was more I guess impressions were always part of my sort of stable. So every impressionist as well generally starts with the people around them. So my dad was the first person that I did an impression of to make the rest of my family laugh. Maybe you guys did too. Um, my dad had a very particular way of eating chocolate. So as soon as he would take the chocolate out, actually, I have a little bar here I can demonstrate. He would he would start to open the chocolate, and it automatically moved into the space of ritual. So there was a long process in the gentle and precise unfolding of the foil, and then he would begin to sort of feather it all out. And as this whole process was going, he would begin this whole cycle of sniffing, and none of us knew where it came from. Just I think as dads in general, you just wake up one morning and you just make weird noises. I think that's the thing. You start going and sniffing. So sniffing was one of his things. So he would go, and then he would take the tiniest bit of chocolate and put it on his tongue. And I mean, it was the most mindful chocolate
Yeah.
eating exercise in the world. He would take this and he would sit on his tongue and he would inhale it and breathe it in. And then of course, we'd all be watching him, with our tongues hanging out of our mouths because we were desperate for some of the chocolate. But he wasn't big into sharing it. So he would then carefully fold it back up and put it back in the box and back into the shelf. And of course, he ate so little of it that the chocolate was gradually turning white. Like the box had probably been given to him, during rationing during the war. So it you wanted the chocolate, but you knew that it was so far past its sell by date. So I guess the comedy kind of started doing impressions of my dad and kind of moved on from there. But it's also a great survival mechanism. I'm not a particularly big guy. I was a tiny child, as a teenager, I looked. When I was 16, I looked 12. So you got picked on from time to time because you were an easy target, and humor was also, was a great little distractor. It was like kind of throwing in a stun grenade or something, a smoke bomb into the altercation. Distract with humor. And then I remember one day, I think I talked about it, I think in Mindful, where one of the guys who I was sort of very nervous of, and one of those the gang who might have picked on me from time to time, I overheard them saying Wheels because I had suddenly got this nickname, and they went, Wheels is sound. And that meant that I was okay, Wheels is sound. And that's because I'd made them laugh. So that, I guess, was
Mm.
one of my little seeds that was planted there. And I realized, what, this comedy stuff could actually, bring me in and out of some interesting situations.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe you can't punch the 6 foot guy in the nose, but you could certainly say something that was like so brilliantly cutting, and which would be more powerful even than perhaps punching him in the nose.
Definitely, yeah. A much safer approach, that's for sure.
So what there had to be like a moment where, you were on stage, you were a host, you were a comedic host of many shows in Ireland, and I think, presenter. You were a presenter for many years. We don't have that terminology here in the States, but tons of people are presenters, but we never think of them as that. Um, because once someone does that, usually at the Oscars or the Grammys or the Emmys, they say something inappropriate and then get fired. So it's sort of like, it's the last funny thing that you do or the last great thing you do, and then your career is destroyed. And then maybe they forgive you or maybe they cancel you. But for you, you had this really meteoric rise of being a presenter and being a comedic host. Um, and then there was was a radio show first in your mind, or bumping into Dave first in your mind, that led to that amazing fusion that the two of you had?
Yeah, it's funny. Well, in my early 20s, I was thinking of it today, actually. I was just chatting about it with my wife, Karina, who you met when you came to
And she's
Dublin, of
such a
course.
brilliant, just a little plug for Karina. What an amazing artist. And I
Mhm.
just actually gave someone a note card last week, and
Ah, no
she
way.
had given me like a little booklet, note cards of her several of her paintings, and I just gifted that just last week. And the person took, like, they didn't even open it. And I go, you can open it. They were just like gazing at the card, going, "Oh, this is so beautiful. This is so amazing. Thank you for this mini painting." And I said, "No, no, no, it's a card. You get to open it up." And then it was
Yeah.
something like, "Be still today," or something. She's got these beautiful lines in there, as well. So, quite a creative DNA combo you have for your legacy.
Yeah, they better not disappoint us. But it's funny. We have we have our man cave and our woman cave here at the end of our garden. And if we angle ourselves properly, we can see each other work. So I can see her painting away and she can see me pretending to work in here.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I was just chatting to her today. There was a movie being shot in our village here in Howth in Dublin, down on the pier, and I was just reminiscing about my time as an assistant director, an AD, back in my 20s, which was a wonderful time. I spent about 5 or 6 years doing that. Learned lots of things. I learned how to smoke, drink passionately, stand around all day. Uh, Tell people they can't park there and shout, "Quiet, please, we're rolling." That was kind of it. Um, and I was thinking of your Dree arcs, David G, that you both were talking about so beautifully. There you go. There's a picture of it on last week's episode. And yeah, it was one of those things that I thought I wanted to do forever, but then I realized that my arc was on the downward trend, and I thought I wanted to try radio. So that's what I did. I started working in news because I did a really good impression of a newsreader. I could put on at 6 o'clock, here are the headlines. I could do one of those kind of newsy voices. So I don't know anything about current affairs or anything about the world, but I did it anyway. But actually, that was one of my first insights into the anxiety I was never really aware consciously that I had. I just thought everybody felt this way. But I remember going in to read the news after about 3 months doing the job, and I felt quite comfortable in the job. I wasn't consciously aware that I was nervous, but my throat started to close up one day as I was reading. And I was like, here are the headlines. The government said that there's, and I started to turn into Yoda. And while I was reading the news, and all my fellow newsreaders were looking at me like, "What is wrong with you?" So I remember I didn't know what it was. I just kept saying my throat thing. I didn't know what it was. So I just removed myself from reading the news for a month or two. And then I sort of drifted. They made me a reporter out on the street. And then I kind of drifted back to it. And I now, looking back, of course, I realized it was anxiety. And that's one of the symptoms. Your throat can start closing up. Um, but I guess a lot of my early working life between that, I mean, after that, I started doing comedy for a radio breakfast show in the same station. Then they gave me the breakfast show. Then I met Dave. We were put together like a play date, and then we stayed working together as a duo for over 20 years. Um, but I think for me, for a lot of my that early working career, and maybe some of your listeners can relate to this, I was always very driven, and I want, just like that child looking up at the altar and thinking, I want to be up there. I had the goal to really move in certain directions, and I still do, of course. I still always want to try out new stuff and test myself, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners do. But at the same time, there was that feeling like I had one foot on the accelerator, driving with passion towards my goals, and then another foot on the brake at the same time, going, "Whoa, what are you doing?" And it was that hand on my throat that was like, no, 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 you shouldn't be doing this. Like literally closing my throat as I tried to bring my voice to the world. So it always felt like that. And every time I jumped up on a comedy stage, it was exciting and there was adrenaline and cortisol and all that good stuff. But it was terrifying. And I had an inner voice that just kept telling me that this is a disaster and your jokes aren't good enough. You're not a real comedian. You're a radio DJ pretending to be one. They're all laughing, but that one guy isn't. Why the hell isn't he laughing? That good old negativity bias in action. And it took me it's really only in the last, I think since I became a meditation teacher in 2018, that's really when I started to ease my foot off the brake and say, imagine what you could do if you weren't braking at the same time as you were accelerating. And I thought that sounds like horrifying because it's like most of my adult life. But um, I think maybe that we can all relate to that feeling of, there's so many of us who really want to get out and do stuff and meet people and get after it and maximize our potential, at those Instagram posts like to say. But there's this other voice, there's this other force inside us that just keeps us in check and wants to keep us small, and can manifest itself in our physical bodies as a closing of your throat, or falling over your words, or sweating, or a panic attack like I had, actually on the way to a comedy festival, you know? And I know it's something that both of you know so much about.
I love, like, you're bringing in so much mindfulness, like when you're talking about earlier how you're on stage and people are crossing their arms and then they start to laugh and they open, and how that's just such a teaching of, I'm all about that. I'm all about what's happening in your body. What are you noticing? So this voice in our head that terrifies all of us, and we all, everybody knows about that. When we ask the question why, people are always like, well, why? Why? Well, that just feeds that voice, right? And so, all these things you're talking about keep going into the sensation of our experience. That's always been there. And when you were doing the news and that was happening, you didn't probably just going, why is the throat thing here? Why is that happening? And it just gets that, guess what that does? It adds more logs onto that fire and it gets worse and worse. This is why people have panic attacks, because they're asking why. And what an offering I have to our listeners and to ourselves, because it happens to all of us, is where is this happening in my body? What am I noticing? That's what the mindfulness is all about. And so in someone's coming to your comedy show or listening to us now, whatever's happening, it's like, what are you noticing in your body as you laugh? What are you noticing as you feel that constriction, that contraction in your body? And just, where is it and what do you notice? Like, no judgment, equanimity, just allow. You were also mentioning earlier, like, I think it was your brother-in-law who said, like, the cloud, is this going to make me more cloudy? It's like, no, it actually brings you into the sky. The mindfulness brings us into the sky like presence, so we can see the clouds, we can see the storm that's coming, we have a greater perspective, we zoom out, right? So I want to zoom out a little bit and offer something like, if that I don't know how old you were when you were having that throat thing, but what would you say to him, given that now you have much more wisdom and much more awareness and tools, but he didn't have those then. What could he have heard? Because there might be people listening today that don't have the tools that we have from David G's teacher training, et cetera, et cetera. What would you say
Mm.
to him?
That's such a great question. I think I would ask him what's going on for you right now,
Yeah.
because I was never able to equate the physical manifestations with anything that was happening in my life, stress, anything. And at that time, I was being quite severely bullied by a work colleague who was older than me, who very clearly resented me getting this airtime, you know. Um, and I never equated, okay, that's a lot of stress and fight or flight in the work environment. And so then when you add the red light of the mic going on, and not missing a word or saying something wrong that could libel you or somebody else, with that added pressure. Of course, my body was going to move into that state. I listen to vinyl. I don't know if you listen to records still,
Mm-hmm.
Elizabeth.
Mm-hmm.
It's for anyone who doesn't look. It's a wonderful pastime. If you want to spend $60 on a record you have for free on your phone, go crazy, knock yourselves out, and it's more hissy and crackly. But on that amp, I have when you crank the volume or the gain on my amp, the needle goes into the red. And I guess years later, I realized I was living my life, maybe not with my needle in the red all the time, but just below it. So any extra load, stress wise, was going to send me into that high stress state, where it would physically manifest in my body. So I guess I would ask my older self, what's going on for you right now? And
Mm-hmm.
ask him how he felt about that person who was making him feel small and like physically threatening him in work. Um, and ask, is there anything, that how could he maybe get some help, or was he getting any sleep, and why did he think he was drinking so much? And
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Right.
I would love to be that big brother who would just I see myself just putting my arm around him and going, come
Yeah.
on, let's talk about what's going on for you right now, because there
Right.
is something. But me then, I hadn't, this was just body doing crazy thing. Like, like you're in the middle of a conversation and you go, hold on, achoo, and you sneeze. There's your body just did a crazy thing. We don't question it. We just move on. We're not going, why am I sneezing? What was that about? Because we're all used to it. So I guess I reacted to physical manifestations of stress in my body and mood, just like a sneeze. It was just stuff that happened.
Mm-hmm.
I never saw that there were things contributing to this sort of pile on my nervous system, and that my needle was gently creeping up there into the
Yeah.
red.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel as a therapist, that these ages are still within us and they arise. And sometimes maybe the throat thing does come. And when it does, like if a client says, I'm feeling, this particular way, that old energy is arising in you. I don't know if that still happens to you from time to time, but that's an opportunity for you to heal that old ancient wound. I say every activation is an invitation for you to be more free, because these things, they come up in our lives, right? Maybe it's the guy not laughing. I don't know what it is, but those we now have the tools to be able to pay attention to what's happening in our bodies, which takes us out of our head, because if we're in our
Mm,
bodies, we're not in our head. If we're in our head, we're just going to add more to it. But if we can just notice what is happening here, we can just bring that kind of loving awareness, into into that experience, into that wound. Do you ever do that?
yeah.
Do you ever get like activated on, I mean, this might be a dumb question, so forgive me, but like you're on stage and I don't know, like what's a really challenging thing that happens for you and maybe you get really activated. Has that happened? How do you handle it? Now that you have these tools, these meditation, these mindfulness tools, how do you bring that into your experience?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I guess people don't really know what being on a stage and and performing to a couple of thousand people is like, and it's different for everybody. And of course, that version of me who was trying to reinvent himself back then as a news person, and put himself out there and getting very aggressively shut down, uh, that those the echoes of that are definitely still within me, and that's like amplified imposter syndrome, and it's been very interesting for me over the last year or so, because I left a very successful national radio show at its height, to walk away and do comedy and meditation full time. So I am that young fledgling newsreader again, and I really
Right.
have to be aware of those times where I'm thinking, oh my God, what am I doing? People are going to say this is a joke, or it's a cynical exercise to get into the wellness area because it's trendy. And you have all these thoughts. Um, and you both spoke to it so well last episode, talking about purpose and trying to navigate what our path is and all that. So yes, there are definitely moments like that, and on stage that's amplified again. And if you
Right.
think sometimes uh, old me on stage would be thinking something goes wrong. I catch a glimpse of somebody, I catch an expression in the crowd of somebody yawning or rolling their eyes or something, and I'm gone. I'm now thinking, oh my God, they think I'm terrible. This is, I shouldn't be a comedian. I shouldn't be up here. They want the next guy to come on. He's going to be better. And I do have a technique that I introduced, and it was the beginning of my previous live tour. And I felt that feeling coming up before one show, before going out to a very big audience. And I was thinking, oh man, here I go again. And I was that scared newsreader, aged 26 or whatever, freaking out. And I was like, okay, what are we going to do here? And I was like, okay, this is happening for a reason now. Something's coming up here. So what can we do? And I realized that so much of the fear of performance, I call my technique the headlight technique. So much of our fear, whether any of your listeners are giving, a best man speech or just standing up at a restaurant saying a few words about a loved one or want to perform or making a presentation in work, it's the fear of the glare of everybody, a glare of disapproval, all those faces looking back at you. And to me, it appeared in my mind like car headlights that were parked, shining in my face in a kind of blinding. And what I did was, okay, if that's the fear, then I'm going to reverse that. So what I do is I light a candle in my green room backstage, and I get quiet with a few breaths, and then I visualize those car headlights, and then I see them moving around to the back of me. So now the lights aren't glaring at me, putting me under pressure. They're shining from behind through me and into the audience. And that's how I see performance for myself now. It's not jumping up on stage going, "Oh, please like me, please love me. Oh God, I hope I don't make a mistake." So I survived this. You know, Now it's very much about I'm here and I am just a vessel or a conduit for, you can call
Mm-hmm.
it God's light, you can call it higher self, you can call it wisdom. And I say a little prayer and I say, may your light shine through me into all the beautiful people who are going to be sitting out there in front of me. And may I say the words, whatever words that they need to hear tonight. And now I'm done. The pressure's off. I'm just there. I'm just that vessel. And
Yeah.
those lights are going to come through me. And once I did that shift, it completely transformed standing up in front of a group of people.
Yeah.
Totally, you know?
Yeah. That's beautiful. I love that.
So yeah, maybe if
Yeah, and
anybody
it's
is listening who is worried about something like that, where they have to maybe stand up at their book club or their local, committee or whatever it happens to be, or that presentation in work, whatever it is, that you can kind of take yourself out of the equation and just take that pressure off. And I'm there. I'm just
Yeah.
there to filter this light and whatever information you're trying to share with people, just ask for it to come through, and you're just the mouthpiece to make it happen.
Yeah, it's the whole trust or fear, We're in fear, we're in our mind, we're in our ego, we got to figure it out. You're checking everything, or you're in trust, I'm the vessel, I'm the conduit. What I always say, I have this, and I'm pretty sure I have no idea. I'm in a not knowing. Okay. So here I am, the expert, but this is what I'm always saying. It's like I have no idea what's going to come through. And when I can just get out, Elizabeth, out of the way, then the present moment that we're all in right now, we merge, and that's when the magic happens. And you
Mm,
know that's comedy. That's that incredible magic that happens when we just let go.
yeah. Well, flow, isn't that where that beautiful flow state happens? I was lucky
Yeah.
enough to talk to Cillian Murphy, who won the Oscar for Oppenheimer, about that very thing
Yes.
from my podcast. And, one of the key elements of the flow state is that your self-analyzing voice takes a back seat. The volume at least gets turned way down. So You cannot be in pure flow state and be self-criticizing at the same time. So that is one of the beautiful gifts, as you know, of practicing meditation, whatever style you're drawn to, is that because you're just working, massaging that beautiful empathy center in there so often, that level of internal kindness that just you keep pouring into yourself will just keep turning the volume down on that inner critical voice so that you can hit that flow state so much easier or more often or whenever you feel you need it. And that's been, I think, one of the greatest gifts that meditation has given me. Um, is the turning the volume down on that critical inner voice, because man, I hammered the crap out of myself. And that morning I had the panic attack driving to the comedy festival. I was in full on just kicking myself around the inside of my head. And because I had been using white wine the night before to quieten that inner voice. We all know anyone who's woken up with a hangover, that voice is louder than ever, and it's there waiting for you. You're like, okay, so you were a terrible person last night. So let's see if we can't get some juicy, self-hatred out of this for the next 25 minutes. So I
Let's
think
let
that's what
everyone know. Let's let everyone know that you were terrible last night.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. I know. It's such an amplifier of, I call it fear juice these days, because I'm so bad at it, thankfully. But I guess as well, that's one of the gifts that meditation can give you, is that you can easily identify the behaviors that maybe aren't working too well for you. I call them my peace pinchers. I talk about it in my new book, helping yourself to identify your peace pinchers. Sometimes they're things like alcohol, sometimes they're behaviors, sometimes they're people. We've all met the peace pinchers in our lives. So that was definitely one of mine.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's so interesting because if you're a comedian, you should expect to be heckled. It's part of the deal. Someone should say something. There's definitely some. In fact, if you don't, it's classic petty tyrant stuff. If you don't have a heckler in the crowd, you need to bring a friend in who will heckle you, just so that shadow and light energy can fully be there.
Mm.
And I remember I was on stage. It was some kind of meditation program that I was one of the voices, teaching in this. Must have been a couple of thousand people, and I'm on stage and I'm mic'd, and I say something, and this person in the second row says, "Actually, I think actually what I said was Ayurveda, the oldest healing system on the planet." And this woman in like the third row says, "No, Kabbalah is." And like no one could hear her except me and the people in those rows, and those rows went back 100 rows. There must have been 100, 200 rows back there, and I'm mic'd with speakers all over the place, and I say to her, actually it's Ayurveda, it's 5,000 years old. And that's what everyone else is hearing. They're not hearing her heckle me. And, and I'm not even making a point with her. And she goes, no, it's Kabbalah. And so she and I are having this argument while I'm on stage. No one can hear her. And I keep blurting out things like, well, in the Yoga Vashishta, this is where it talks about this. And in the, of course it's the oldest. There are actually places in the Charaka Samhita that actually say that the Saraswati River was at this point. We're talking maybe 5,500 years ago. And people are looking at me, the other, 1,999 people in the room are looking at me like I've lost it. I have totally, I'm not speaking to them anymore. I'm having this whole dialogue with this person. And all I needed to say, and I changed this forever, I need to say Ayurveda, one of the oldest healing systems on the planet. I'm not
One
going to
word.
defend Ayurveda. It's done fine for 5,000 years without me holding the flag and insisting it's the oldest one. But, that I needed to learn that lesson in that moment.
Yeah.
So
But
in
isn't it really interesting though that you were in full flight, you were in your flow, you were, doing your thing, and all it took was a one little sentence from a stranger, no, and just to question, maybe, I'm not I'm not sure who was right in that argument, but even if she was wrong, it was just that finger that rocked your Jenga tower, that's suddenly what you thought was this beautifully solid platform was whoa, and that can happen us all. I think we can all feel very comfortable in our skin, and we're going after it, and maybe we started something new, and one little barb, one little comment, one little sort of well-timed little joke even can rock our sense of self-belief and our belief in our ability to live as this new person in this new role.
Which is like the greatest gift of all, in my
Mm.
opinion. I'm always talking about breaking down belief systems, breaking down our identity. This week has been like the theme. There's always themes I'm seeing people all day. And this week it's all about what you're talking about, like this identity, breaking down who am I, and like, identifying as the news person or the comedian or this, like the more we grip or cling to an identity, the more you suffer, period, because it will all be broken down because it's just a thought you keep thinking, right? And then you have to keep, that's what imposter syndrome is all about. It's like, I gotta keep this thing going. Like, what is it again? Because it's you're constantly changing. Like, you can't keep that going. That's why it feels fake. It's like, I'm pretty sure I have no idea who the hell I am. Okay. And I'm like figuring that out a moment at a time. In this moment, I'm figuring that out. And in every moment, we're figuring that out. And the more that we can, like, that's the beauty of meditation and mindfulness, because it, it does soften, but not in the way that you were saying, like these friends of yours or family members were like concerned. It's like softening those edges that we grip, the
Mm.
rigidity that the egoic mind and can create of like what I should be or what I've been told is correct. And it's like my mantra, maybe, maybe not. Can I question that? And the more that we can question these beliefs and let that Jenga thing, maybe I am wrong. Okay, like cool. Like let's talk about it. Let's open up the conversation and then we get to expand into more, you know?
Yeah, yeah. A golf course is a great place has been for me to see this in action, because you're on kind of the second hole playing with strangers, and then eventually the question will come out. So, what do you do? You know, and since I left the radio, I realized that I am really unable to answer that question. I don't know how to say what I do anymore. I was always I work on the radio. I'm a broadcaster or whatever you want to say. Now it's like and I go, oh God, here comes that question. This week I mix comedy and meditation to help people to de-stress. And that usually shuts them up. Then they're like, oh, let's go back to the golf. Yeah, this is about 200 yards. Yeah. So it's been a great exercise for me in terms of if not letting go, as you touched on there, loosening my grip.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we feel under pressure. People say, hey, you need to let that go. You need to let that relationship go. You need to let go of that identity that you had of that old job. And it's not easy, but letting go begins with just loosening your grip. And sometimes that's enough. That's a place to be for a while, where you haven't totally just reinvented yourself, darlings. You're just letting go enough so that you can go, oh, okay, this is interesting. Okay, but you don't have to go the whole hog straight away. And that's been a good lesson for me in terms of over the last year or so, at this letting go of that persona. In media they talk about the persona all the time, your radio persona, and and being just learning to be really happy and content with this version of you that was always underneath whatever hat you were wearing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have a suggestion for you. The next time you're out on the links, when someone says, "So what do you
Mm.
do?" you could always reply, "My very best. My very best." It's always one of those like, "What?"
Yeah.
And then usually I'll follow that up with, what's your most dominant nostril right now?
Yeah.
And those
Well,
two pattern interrupts are like a 1-2 punch, and suddenly we're on to where's my ball? Where, what's going on?
Yeah, but
well,
you really do realize how much of our identity is wrapped up in what we do every day. I mean, that's the question. Hey, so what do you do? And you're like, well, I do lots of things, but we automatically assume it's the job. That's me. Um, and I think I guess I've been living in the world of busyness for the last year, just researching it for my book, and you really realize how much of our busyness, how many of the reasons we stay in situations are jobs that aren't a good match for us anymore. They may have been 10 years ago, but not quite now, is because our identity is in there. So we stay in that busyness. And if there's a little feeling in your gut saying, hey, maybe you're ready to do something new, it's like, oh God, don't tell me that, because this is who I am. So I'm just going to fill my schedule even more with stuff so that I don't have to think about those deeper questions, or listen to that feeling in my gut, which I christened my inner potato, because it felt like this sort of little medium-sized spud that was sitting in my gut, just gently letting me know I was ready to do something else, even if it intellectually it didn't make any sense, or financially. But yeah, I think that's why we hang on to those. We cling. We tighten our grip sometimes when we're locked into that sense of identity, particularly through our work, or maybe a relationship, or where you live, or you know. And it's just a gentle loosening allows us to see other possibilities, and we start to listen to our potato.
mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
you and I were speaking, we were speaking a lot around the time when you were internally winding down your Dermot and Dave trajectory,
Yeah.
and it was a leap to this other thing because yes, you'd been on stage talking about that, but you'd never been on stage. I'm guessing. I'll go out on a limb here. You'd never been on stage before and said, "Hello, people. Let's take a long, slow, deep breath in and allow our eyelids to ever so gently float closed, my people." Right? You'd never done that one before. So that first moment when you were on stage, and I know you probably had to like set it up a lot to get people to, to like, what? Wait, I see, I've read this guy's book, Mindful. I've listened to him, for 20 years on the radio, and now he's going to tell me to what? And so what was going on inside of you when you realized you were going to, right before you were going to guide people just to connect to the present moment in an overt way, like mindfulness?
Oh wow. Well, I know it was like all things. I guess sometimes particularly on the back of a book, it can sound like you made life decisions. Your life is nothing but these glorious aha moments that you suddenly leapt into action. I think we all know these things are a slow burn, and the insights generally come after a period of massive discomfort. So I was very just disillusioned with my radio job, and having a civil war in my head between the part of me is like, just go in and do the job. It's a great job. It's well paid. People love the show. You're working with your best friend. You're having a laugh. Are you crazy? And then the other part going, doesn't suit you anymore, and you're not happy, and it's draining you, and you're exhausted after work, and you keep daydreaming about doing other things, and this meditation thing is far more than just this background thing. I think you could do this. You heard that guy David G? He was making people laugh, and I think you could do that. You're like, no, shut up. This is terribly risky. So there was a good period of that. I think since when I did the Master of Wisdom and Meditation teacher training with your wonderful self, I had no intention of becoming a teacher when I embarked on that, but it was afterwards. I was like, I found myself explaining what I was doing to people, and I was naturally using humor and simplifying things and making it accessible to people who wouldn't normally be into it. And I realized, well, if I can do that for those two people in the coffee shop, I could probably do it for 15 people over here in a in a sports club, or like maybe I could do 100 people in a company, or maybe I could do 1,000 people in the theater, and it just kind of grew a little bit. So um, the transition period, I liken it to, and anyone who's ever made that career jump, which, both of you have, and it's that question inside, when will I know the timing is right? How will I know? And I got the image of, Indiana Jones, or Harrison Ford is Raiders of the Lost Ark. He's galloping, he's on the horse, and the train, he's catching up on the train, and they're going kind of side by side. And then at some point he decides, okay, now, and he jumps and he catches onto the side of the train, and he leaves the horse behind, and he goes in this new vehicle. And I think so many moments that are in our life are like that, particularly with a job or career, or taking a risk on a new identity for yourself. There comes a point where you just instinctively know, now, jump,
Mm.
and you have to be prepared to get it wrong. Maybe it's harder than you thought, or easier, or maybe you're thinking, oh God, I should have done this 5 years ago. So there is that Raiders of the Lost Ark, that indie moment that I think we all have
Mm.
to embrace at some point.
I love that. The indie moment I always think of is when he jumps. I think it's the Last Crusade, and he jumps into the empty. Do you remember that when he's in the place? I think it's that one, and he jumps, and there's nothing there, and then the bridge arises. Do you remember that
Yeah,
part?
he
Yeah.
steps out. Yeah.
Yeah. It's trust. It's trust,
Mm.
trusting that potato, the inner potato. That, like, when you were talking about the potato, I'm like, here's the tree arc. Like, here, you're coming down. This is the potato. He's right here. I'm going to draw a little potato here now, moving forward.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's honoring that deeper. I don't really even think it's a voice personally. I think the voice in your head, nothing to listen to.
Mm.
To me, it's beyond voice. I don't know how to describe it. I don't have words for it. It's a feeling. It's an energy. Again, words fail
Yeah.
me.
Well, that's what makes
It,
it so frustrating when you're like talking to a financial advisor, or your partner,
right.
or somebody you've worked with, and they're like, why, what do you feel, what are you thinking, why? And you're like, it's kind of a gut, it's kind of an energy, it's kind
Yeah, yeah,
it's kind
yeah.
of a calling. And you're like,
Yeah.
they all sound like you're suddenly robbing all your vocabulary from the Old Testament or something.
Right. It's the force. The force.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, yeah,
Because
no,
that's
but
not what the intellectual side of your brain wants to hear when you're making big decisions that could be affecting more people than you. It doesn't
right.
want fluffy, vague words. It wants, it wants the definitive, helpful, perfect vocabulary. But that all goes out the window when you're in one of those little changing junctions.
It's
But
that
now
it's
with
that internal quest for certainty that we think if I
Yeah.
can just have certainty, then, but we don't realize that, okay, now you have certainty. Oh, the wind blew. Now you have uncertainty again. So you have flickers throughout your life of certainty where you're like, yes. And then as that word fades into the ether, uncertainty arises. Boom, here it is again. And so if we can
Yeah.
remind ourselves, uncertainty, it's uncertain, but it's infinite possibilities. This is the path where we
uncertainty.
actually get to step up and then lean into something that we never even visioned before. Dermot, talk a
Mm.
little bit about what inspired, um, you know, here you are, mindful, smash success. It was the number one book in Ireland for I don't know how many weeks and months. And I was just so excited. I was like watching, I was feeling like it was for somehow my baby, even though I was distinctly a distant surrogate in this process. But I was like so excited. It's like, yes, another week. Yes, it's the number one book in Ireland. Yes, and then you launch your podcast and it's like, yes, it's the number one podcast, and so suddenly it's like winning, one more win, one more win. And again, there's so many plateaus in your life where you could have just kicked out the chaise lounge and said, okay, this is it. I have arrived. one more time. But yet you then crept into, I think I'm going to do Busy and Wrecked. And I'm going to write the book Busy and Wrecked, and I'm going to do the tour, the tour, and suddenly everything is high velocity, blast off again. And so, first of all, congratulations. Just, it's like classic, oh, overnight success. You know, good on you. How did you pull that one off? But we know, these things are decades in the making. It's energetically decades in the making, moving you towards these other areas. So you just like swept through Ireland with your Busy and Wrecked tour. How'd that feel? What was that like? Because I noticed each time the audiences were getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and to the point where you were like, I don't know where you were. I don't think it was in Limerick, but you had posted something on social media where you're like, here I am in my hotel right before the gig starts, far away from home. And I just wanted to make sure that as I look out my window, I can see a garbage dumpster in the alley, and I can see also something fairly unspecial and uninspiring. And it's like, oh, welcome to being on tour. So that was just great. But just talk about like the energetic buildup and the deep fulfillment as you got to touch so many people in so many different places and so many stages of life, and really inspire and elevate them.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been an incredible experience. I I have one more show left, would you believe? As we speak here today, I've got just one more. I've done 20, which I can't believe. And there's nothing I love more. It's such a gift to just feel like this is exactly what I want to be doing, because I'm very aware that there's a lot of people never get to experience that, you know. Um, and I guess the more I do it, the more comfortable I am. Like, I can't describe the joy of sitting. I'm on stage. So to give people an insight into what the show might look like, it's essentially three parts in two halves. So the first half is sort of bang straight stand-up comedy. I incorporate my own story, and I kind of um as we say here, I would take the mick out of myself a bit. So I poke fun at what I'm doing and the world of meditation itself and all that stuff. And that's generally to put people at ease, because there's a lot of people who are possibly cynical in the audience or skeptical. I always ask one question at the start of all my shows. It's like, this show is comedy, it's meditation, it's transformation. Who is ready to be transformed? And there's always a big bunch of people who go, yeah. And then I go, and who is here because you were dragged here by someone who's sick of your shit? And there's another way. So there's boyfriends, husbands, wives, best friends who get encouraged along to my shows, by people who say, you need this. If you want us to stay together, you're coming to this show. So, I make them laugh. I relax them with some stand up. And then we move into, I guess it's like a funny TED talk with some slides and images. And I take people through all the research I've done on busyness. And I laugh at how topsy-turvy our world is these days in terms of how we prize busyness, and we wear our busy badge with pride, and we scoff at rest and recovery. And then the second half of the show, the whole look at the show changes, and I'm sitting in a cube, and I call it my cube of calm, and it's like lit up and with neon lights, and it changes different colors, and I gently guide people into the process of meditating. There's a good few gags in there at the start to kind of help people feel at ease, and we start with something simple like the belly breath, and I say start with the hand on the belly, and this always works best if you put your hand on your own belly, and anything to just kind of cause those little ripples of laughter through it. So that's the uncomfortable part, where the people with the woo-woo alarms are starting to freak out, and you can just put them at ease. And then I take them on this lovely journey through part of it is asking those deeper questions when we can actually step out of busyness and ask, who am I? Not who do I think I should be at this point in my life, or who 10 years ago me thought I should be, or who my wife or a partner thinks I should be. No, who am I right now at this point? Because that was key for me in being able to move on and try something new. And what do I need? What does this person right now need? Again, not what do I think I should need, or what do I need right now? And is there anything in my life, just like we were talking about, Elizabeth, that I'm ready to let go of? And if I can't let go fully, can I loosen my grip? Is it the way I'm talking to myself in my head? Is it my behavior? Is it something about my work? Is it a peace pincher in my life that's just causing me extra stress that I don't need? So, yeah. So, what the greatest gift of the live show is that there's an energetic journey. We go high with laughter and those big belly laughs, and we come down into this beautiful little peaceful space. But it's actually quite therapeutic for me, because there was a moment in 2017 where I was sleeping in my car because I was so exhausted from just saying yes to everything. My job was draining me, and if I needed to meet somebody in the afternoon, I would have to have a sleep in my car. I would have to sleep for 40 or 45 minutes just to get through the day. And I thought that was quite normal for me, because when we get super busy, the abnormal becomes normal fairly quickly. And I went to the doctor's surgery, and I cried with the doctor in her office. I'm sitting there, and she's like, "So, what's going on for you today?" And I just burst into tears. So I tell this whole story in the book and the live show. And at the time it was traumatic. But I made it into a comedy routine, and it gets the biggest laugh of the night is me at my lowest point. And I think that's just such a beautiful thing. What happened when I sat there in front of the doctor, so vulnerable after crying, which I never do, for 2 minutes solid, like one of those shoulder shaking, snotty, ugly cries. I was like, finally gathered myself, and I said, "I'm so sorry. I don't know where that came from. I think I'm just so overwhelmed and burnt out. I don't know what to do." And the doctor looked at me with such amazing kindness, and she said, "Me too. I'm completely burnt out. I've got a whole load of patients out there. I don't know how I'm going to get through the day." And I was like, "Have you tried exercise?" Or, so I go into this whole routine. But that's one of the beautiful gifts that this thing, has this journey has given me, is that I've been able to take those moments in my own life and actually shine a lot of humor into them. And it just softens, it softens the whole event. And then you can start to learn the lessons without that charge.
I love this. I love this. This is exactly what I was talking about. It's like that window that you're opening for everyone, that vulnerable space, right? That
Mm.
when she said me too, it's like everyone wants to
Can you
be.
say that again? You broke up right after you said I love that.
Okay. I love that. I love this moment when you're in the doctor's office and she says, "Me too." Because this is what's happening with your audience. This is what's happening when David G makes us all laugh when we're doing the meditation teacher training. It's like that window inside of our hearts opens. We feel a connection. Suffering is such a powerful teacher. We are very, very stubborn people, humans. We are stubborn. And it takes suffering for us to finally be like, okay, I'm going to loosen the grip, right? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. And maybe I need to let go of this thing. Maybe that's what I need to do. It takes that sometimes, often. And that is such a beautiful, when I listen to you describe your show, I want a front row seat. It sounds like what a gift, you're giving, as you said, yourself, but so many people. I imagine now, I'm not going to say that your previous life had no meaning. Of course it had meaning, but I'm imagining um, there's a lot of meaning that you're experiencing from this new Dree arc you're in right now. Yeah.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. You know, one of
Yeah.
my in the book, the second half of my book is my 10 tools of space. And one of them is purpose. And I know you guys were speaking so beautifully about that in previous episodes, but you know, I compare purpose and meaning to identical twins that I used to know in university, that they'd be walking towards you and you think, oh God, is that Paul or is that Rob? Is that Paul? It's Rob. No, it's Paul. And you can easily get them confused. But when you see them up close, they're different. And purpose and meaning are kind of like that for me, you know, where um, you know, meaning is that extra juice that suddenly comes out of the things that we're doing. And it's transient. You know, we can be in a meaningful relationship, but that relationship can end. It can lose its meaning, you know. Um, and so I found that the meaning was slowly sliding out of my day-to-day radio gig, which had tremendous meaning for me before, and it was now growing up these little green shoots of meaning in these other spaces. So um, and that's what it gives me, is this incredible sense of fulfillment, and as a result, this sense of purpose, you know. And I think purpose is really, it's, you know, what impact do we want to have on the world around us, you know. and
Hmm.
and I can feel that, I can see it, you know. And of course I get to meet people after the shows, as I'm doing selfies and signing books because I have a massive ego. But I get to talk to them. I get to meet people and hear their stories and see that ripple, you know, that David G always speaks so beautifully about. So, yeah, it is that beautiful blend of purpose and meaning.
Hmm. Yeah. And I just talked about this, but I have to bring it up again because you're talking about purpose and meaning. This client of mine had told me about this man who had three brushes with death. And, he was struck by lightning and heart attack, and I think struck by lightning again. Okay. But he had this life review, where when he was,
He
dying,
really
but
should
came
he
back.
should let go of that 50-foot metal pole he walks
I
around
know,
with.
I know,
Why
I
does this
know.
keep happening to me? How am I so
Can I get a
Right.
refund on that umbrella?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what he noticed he was surprised by his life review. It was these little moments. It was not the, big moments. It was, he smiled at a stranger, and in the life review, it showed the ripple that brought into all the people, the domino effect of that.
What Elizabeth's
And
referring to when she talks about this life review, for our listeners who don't know what that is, it's that moment, when you're at the pearly gates. It's that moment when, when you're sitting in front of some divine creator, and it's like, okay, suddenly, like, let's flash your life, all the years in 15 seconds. And we've all heard about that, and had that perhaps happen even to us. But in the depths of those, we think we're going to see all these giant moments. Oh, the giving birth moment, and the marriage moment, and the getting the job moment. And really, what you're speaking to, it's everything in between.
right. And also, I think so many of our shoulds are like, fear of, how am I going to be judged? Especially if you were raised in, like, particular religions. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to be judged by that I didn't do the thing, right? Or, it's not even, we think that we're going to be seeing all the beautiful moments. It could be that how I failed, or how but no. So I was told that months ago, and it totally shifted everything for me. And I think it's just an important thing to bring into what you're talking about with this life and
Yeah.
purpose, and ripple, that we just don't know. None of us know what's going on for anybody, and how, a smile, or someone cutting you off in traffic. We think that that's a personal attack. People think that's a personal attack. That person might be rushing off to the hospital
It is.
to give birth. You know, but yeah, right. Yes, of course.
Yeah. Well, do you know what? I heard you speaking about that. I'm obsessed with near-death experiences. I love those, and I was very familiar with the concept of the life review. And I was driving along today and I was really thinking about what you said about it's the smiling at the stranger. That's the one that gets you, isn't it? Because you think
Yes.
of all the times you didn't smile and you were grumpy with the person at the checkout or, and I was driving along in my car today and a car pulled out of a gateway right in front of me and I slammed on the brakes. This was just before we started speaking together. And I slammed on the brakes and did a bit of a skid and I stopped quite close to this car I would have just totally T-boned it. And old me would have just, what the hell are you? Rah, 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 and this is me, years ago, not yesterday. The meditation helped with the ranting. But what immediately came to mind was when I looked at the driver, he looked like a granddad with grandkids in the back, and he had a big smile on his face, even though he had nearly caused a crash, with a little bit of sort of shock, but he was still smiling, kind of. And the kids were in the back, and they were kind of smiling, and so I just went and kind of smiled and waved him on, and because it was so fresh in my mind what you were talking about is that if I had shouted and roared at him and gone, what the hell, you crazy moron, what are you doing? Maybe he's at that age where he doesn't have much more time of driving left. And that's his entire world. And him being able to drive his grandkids down to buy ice cream in the village, that's his thing.
Hmm.
And what would have been the ripple effect of me making him feel like a complete fool and that he'd, you know, maybe he should stop driving if he keeps having more of those incidences. Um, but how I reacted in that moment could have been one of those near-death experience life review things where you're going, you didn't give this guy a hard time, and look at him, he, suddenly took
Yes.
up jet skiing, and now he's a world champ at age 88 or whatever,
Right.
But
Well,
it happens in real life, yeah.
absolutely. And it also you gifted yourself because if you're yelling at somebody, like often they're not like you're free. You had an exchange. It's back and forth. It's not only them. You're receiving this grandfather, this children, you're receiving the humanity that Me Too moment. Like again, okay, Me Too has a whole other context, which we're not talking about
Me
when the
also.
doctor, me
Also, let's
also.
call this also me.
Also me. Right. Not to be confused. But anyway, yeah, it's about connection. That's what it's about. Life
5
is
years
about
from now,
connection.
right? 5 years from now, Grandpa, remember that stupid jerk guy who jumped out of his car and started barking? I wonder whatever happened to him. He probably, because you're thinking, like if you keep pulling out and into traffic, you're going to get killed and you're going to get your family killed. And they're thinking, I wonder what happened to that crazy jerk who just barked at us. He probably had a heart attack now, right? You know, that's the power of that ripple, potentially.
Right. But those
Yeah.
space, this talking about the spaces, the spaces, what are we bringing to the spaces and time? I did some research a while ago on like waiting, and we spend 5 years waiting, like in lines, in traffic. And can we use our waiting time as a mindfulness practice? So when I'm waiting in traffic or I'm waiting in line or whatever, shift that into what am I noticing is happening in my body? Or what am I noticing is happening around me? These are those little moments, those spaces in between apparently the most important things, right? Where I'm going, or maybe not. Maybe those are the moments that make life meaningful, but we have to choose to inject or lean in with love or peace or curiosity or whatever it is.
Yeah, these are
Mm.
opportunities. These are powerful opportunities. We beg for these moments, the space between. We beg for it. Dermot, I mean, you were napping in your car. I mean, we were like begging. This is why COVID came to visit us because everyone was saying, I just need a break. I just need to catch my breath. I just need
Yeah.
things to slow down. We didn't think it would happen like it did, but power of prayer, we co-created that one. And so it's a these are gifts, and we could think, Oh, I ordered my coffee. It'll take 6 minutes. Let me scroll mindlessly for the texts that didn't come and for my emails that didn't come and see if anyone liked me on my the social media post that didn't happen. Or we could actually take a step back and take a breath and actually rejuvenate ourselves in the space between. And you are a master of it, Dermot. Elizabeth, you are a master of it. Hopefully, our listeners are really tapping into that because it's the secret to everything. It's the yoga sta. It's the connect to the present moment and then get busy and then do your thing. But if you can just embrace that present moment and celebrate that present moment and even just close your eyes and take one breath, or while you're driving, don't close your eyes and just take one deep breath. We never do that. We're just so we're just so we're just so busy and wrecked that who would ever take the opportunity to do that. Dermot, people can pre-order your book right now, but people will be listening to this podcast long after April 3rd. And so I don't even want to say pre-order because for years people are going to be ordering outright and grabbing that book and bringing it into their life. We're so grateful that you've taken the time to hang out with us. It's fairly evident that we could keep rolling for another 5 hours or 5 days of convo. Are there any final words you'd like to share with at least our audience, which you should know, our number one city on the planet, 10% of our listeners, Dublin. So, and another 2%, the rest of Ireland. So, come on, Cork, pull your weight. Um, Dublin's been pulling your weight for centuries. Now it's time for you to step it up. Um, anything you would like to share to sort of like bring us home?
Um, there's a word that runs right the way through my book, which I think just ties into so much of what we've been talking about, and that is akasha,
Mm.
space. And for me, that has become the word that sits in the background of everything that I do these days. It has completely shifted my perception of my world and the world around me. It actually came to me on a run, would you believe? I was running and I began to repeat the word akasha and tap my chest. And I was like, I am literally losing my marbles. What is happening? Akasha, akasha. So when I got home, I Googled it. And sure enough, there it was, space, ether, the space between the notes, the space that holds sound. And I was like, there's got to be something to this. And it has continued to grow in my life. And I guess what I would like to say to people is that the world is so set up for busyness and distraction at the moment. There are the world's greatest psychologists paid the world's greatest amount of money to pull your attention here, there, and everywhere, most notably out of the present moment. But science tells us the more we can pop in there, even for a few moments, the happier we will be, the more content we will be. And that space can feel uncomfortable for a lot of people because we're so distracted and so busy, and because the world wants us out of that space. Just being in a moment of space can feel uncomfortable. So don't worry if you tried to meditate and it felt weird or strange, or if you feel awkward in conversations, if you feel you need to fill the space, in chats with somebody with noises or words. Or the more we step into that space and make ourselves okay with uncertainty and okay with not knowing who we are or what our purpose is at this moment in time, the more we can just settle into our little cube of calm, our space, you will become comfortable with all it has to offer, and you'll find the answers in there. So akasha is the key, and I hope that people find it when they read the book.
So beautiful.
Mm. I
So,
love it.
so perfect. Um, thank you for taking the time. We know how busy you are. Glad we could pull you out of your car to make sure that you at least got some
Yes.
got some
You know,
rejuvenation with
things have
us.
gotten weird when you're in a place called Home Store and More, picking out a car duvet and an eye mask for your naps. You know you've veered off track.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah.
A car duvet. So brilliant.
Yeah.
Um, Dermot Whelan, we are so honored to have you close out season 3. Elizabeth and I talk about you all the time. I think about you and dream about you all the time. I follow you everywhere you go, either in person or through social media or wherever I can track you down. Keep leading the way. Thank you so much for everything that you do. Ireland is so lucky to have you as this native son who truly is raising the vibration of the Emerald Isle. Um,
Mm,
please join us again at some point in the future. Elizabeth, hanging out with you is such a joy. Again,
mm.
we didn't know anything except Dermot. That was our Regis moment. That's all we knew. What's the
Yeah.
theme? What's the topic? I don't know. Dermot Whelan.
Yeah.
So blessings to you, Dermot, and keep meditating. And can't wait to read um,
Yeah, me too. I can't wait to read it.
your new book because and everyone out there, get out there and at least get a copy or at least get on the list for Busy and Wrecked. Can't see him live this go round, but perhaps the next time you'll definitely be able to check him out. And love to you and your family.
Thank you. Love to you guys. Keep up the amazing work you do and play that wonderful theme tune. My God, it stays up. I walk around my house singing it. I'm sure I'm not the only listener and fan who walks around singing that theme tune. Oh, it's so
Yes.
great. So
I love
great.
it.
Thanks. Thank you guys. Lots of love from Ireland.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. Come on, Jamar. See if you can elevate Dermot by singing The Shadow in the Light. It's a wrap. That's great.
Thank you.
Uh, Thank you guys. That was so lovely.
It was. I want to see your
Yeah.
show next time you're doing it. We should
Well,
do another.
it's my mission to take this to other spaces. Ironically, I it's hard because I don't have a profile outside of Ireland really, but I'm looking at trying to tap into some audiences around the world. So I'm hoping to do a show in Sydney later in the year. And maybe there's a sort of an expat Irishy audience I could tap into in the States. I really think this will resonate with English speaking audience wherever they are.
Great.
So I would really dearly love
Yeah.
to do this
Well, if you do
beyond
something,
Ireland.
clearly Boston would be,
Mm.
probably my number one recommended place for all Irish people to collect. Um, but as you get closer, let me know because Elizabeth and I will
Oh yeah, we'll be there. We'll be in the
we'll
front
be there.
row.
We'll be there.
What about
Well, you
Because
guys,
Chicago? What about Chicago? Is it
well, when
Chicago?
yeah, Chicago too. Chicago
Chicago's
too.
huge, Irish.
Dermot, I don't know if you're aware, but Chicago, they've all these little canals running through all of Chicago, and on St. Patty's Day, they dye
Yeah.
them all green. The whole
Yes.
yeah.
city is just like that green sludge. Um, and so I lived in Chicago for a bit, so that was pretty cool.
Yeah, you're like, oh wow, you dyed the river green for Patrick's Day. They're like, yeah, we dyed it green with the
Yeah, right.
nuclear plant downstream.
I swear, we dyed it green.
Yeah.
All right, I've got to figure out how to convert Zoom recordings into MP3, so I'll be doing that over the next 72 hours.
Oh,
Um,
it just does it. It just does
but
it automatically, doesn't it? As soon as you hit stop, until you end the meeting, it's going to convert, and you'll be left with an M4A and an MP3
oh,
in the
okay,
Zoom folder.
right.
It'll just
Then I'll
be
drag that
done.
into Audacity, and that's what we do. That's what we do all our editing. I am the editor. That's who are. Mostly, I'm the engineer. We have occasionally another guy pops in
Brilliant.
to do our engineering. But
This
I
is
like
now
it.
my studio for season 3. I just left I was like, why am I paying these people to stand around and point lights at me and hit record? I could do that myself.
Right.
Um, so I'll be Ed, I'll be the tech guy for our chat. Are you still up for that, David G? Do you have time?
Yeah,
Oh,
sure.
yeah.
Can you give me 5 minutes?
Yeah, I'll give you as long as you need.
Yeah, 5 minutes is good. How
Okay,
about
cool.
at 10 to the top of the hour? 10
Sounds
minutes
good.
to the okay.
Okay.
Elizabeth, I'm glad you blocked those 2 hours because I was like, we're probably just gonna go for like
You
45
are,
minutes.
we always go long, so you
Yeah.
never know.
All right.
So good to be with you guys.
You
Yeah.
too,
Bye,
Elizabeth. Great
everyone.
to see you. Thank you.
Okay.
Blessings. All
Bye.
right. Bye bye.